I was given this meal for free. It's just an instant meal. I put it in the frying pan, so it really wasn't any more instant than making an omelet. And that's how small it is. That's the omelet. And like it comes with, it's smaller than the picture in the box. It's the picture is bigger than the actual omelet. And it comes with those potatoes. So I ate the potatoes part of it with I fried up some beans and peas and stuff.
You made
some
it
spinach.
healthy by mixing in some healthy stuff.
And James gets the omelet because he already has potatoes there. And so, yeah, he's eating
so
a bit differently.
I do want to point out they made sure the potatoes were in the background, so perspective makes them seem less than your perspective.
So Cocaine Bear gets the top of the stack rating. And that's against the Best of Agatha Christie Volume 1, which was awesome. It featured, and Then There Were None, Five Little Pigs, and Death on the Nile. So,
and the Poirot ones had that little guy, the wee guy that actually looks the way Poirot.
Suchet, David Suchet, I think his name is, or something like that. Anyway, yeah, he does Poirot.
He looks it and he acts it.
Yeah, very well. But anyway, I had a hard time deciding, which one should be top of the stack, because I mean, this is awesome, and this production of And Then There Were None and the others, very, very well done. So, but I laughed so hard in this.
I'm not sure if I've ever heard you laugh more per unit time than for that movie Cocaine Bear. And it's a very dark comedy, right?
Yeah. I would call it horrific comedy. Horrific. But they did it so well, so that even though you're seeing extreme gore, I mean, people, this bear is on cocaine. When I first saw this at the library, I was like, Cocaine Bear, what in the world is this? What's this about? This is based on a true story. Oh my gosh, and what a story.
Happened in the wilds of Georgia, so
wow.
Not everything is tame, i.e. Jimmy Carter that comes out of there.
This, I mean, you see the posters on the wall that show you, this was back when, when I was a girl. So you see the two kids,
10 years
and
old.
You're like, yeah, that would have been my age, and so honestly, I think this movie is made for me and people of my age group more than other people even, I think, because I'm out hiking. And if you've been watching the hiking things, I show you when I find a bear print in the mud, and at the beginning of the show, there's some people hiking and they don't even notice the print. It's right there in the mud. They just step past it and whatever. Be aware of where you are. And having said that, like almost every time I go hiking now, I see people have the bear spray. They have it out, they're ready.
I saw one guy with a knife. Huge, but I don't think it was legal for him to be lugging it around anywhere. But
so people, I think they're watching too much Cocaine Bear, and they're thinking, "Oh man, I'm gonna have some interactions here, and I'm gonna have to be able to defend myself." Well, when you're out in a place like Waterton Park, you'll notice the bears run away from you. They don't want anything to do with you because they know that if they interact with humans, they get shot. They get dead. They don't relocate them somewhere else. No, they get dead.
They relocate them 6 feet.
Yeah, so they know. Having said that, I mean, I've never come across or even heard a story about a bear like this. This is amazing.
Almost like a limitless supply of cocaine.
Exactly. Yeah, like I guess the one guy in the story was saying, no, we got to get the bags of cocaine because this is $14 million worth of cocaine. And they're going to come after me and they're going to come after my family. We got to get this stuff. And anyway, and I mean, that would have been in 1985, $14 million worth of, that's a huge amount of cocaine.
Presumably. And separate bags, right?
Yeah.
You
Well,
can
they can't
mention
fit them all in one duffel bag, right? So
Yeah.
they're in multiple duffel bags all
and
over the place.
It was someone bailing out of a plane, right, and dropped the bag.
Yeah, well, you'll see that right
Yeah.
away in the movie. That doesn't take long to get to that
So
point.
you don't need a spoiler.
And I'm not going to spoil any of this movie because
Okay.
it's all great. It's so awesome. I never could have imagined that they would make something so horrific so funny. I was reminded of times when, people like, I worked at the Calgary Zoo, and I called them the trip lines because they put these, they were just low little lines around. They wanted people to get the sense while they're walking down the path that they're a part of nature that's around them, right? So they didn't have fences there to interfere, like especially in the Aspen Woodlands part and stuff like that, right? So you're walking down the path, but they're there, the little trip lines. You're not supposed to go in off the path, and there's things to ensure that you don't. And so anyway, but I worked there. I had to weed there and stuff like that, so I'm always having to go back and forth across these trip lines. And I remember there was one woman, so I tripped. I tripped before, and your hands, you catch yourself and they burn and whatever. And she tripped and I laughed. She tripped on the trip line and I laughed, and she was, I could tell, she thought I was a kind of a freak or something for laughing, but she looked like a doll, just falling. And sometimes, you don't mean to laugh at somebody else getting pain. You've felt it too. You've tripped over the lines, but anyway. And so you get this in the movie. You're laughing and you're like, oh, I shouldn't be laughing at this because this is horrific, right? But yet you do. So anyway, wow, what a story. So it turned out I was watching 2 stories about cocaine yesterday. So and then there were none. They're getting amped up on cocaine a lot. And this story, so much cocaine. And we were talking about addictions and stuff like that. People with drug addictions. And James was saying to me that William S. Burroughs said that it was tougher for him to get off alcohol than cocaine, or what was it? Yeah.
Heroin.
Oh, heroin. Okay. And you've heard a lot of things like people saying, well, sugar reacts the brain reacts to sugar much in the same way that it reacts to cocaine, and it's sugar is really tough to it's addictive, right? It's tough to get off of if you've been taking in a lot of refined sugar and worse. I mean, there's some sweeter products out there that they're excitotoxins, whatever, but it's tough to get off those things. So anyway, because they're addictive. And we were listening to a radio program on the CBC recently, and a psychiatrist was talking about how children can't be trusted to not to control themselves against consuming too much sugar or whatever. And then she said adults can't even control themselves against sugar. And I will write more about that in a blog post, and I'm going to leave that there for me because I don't want my video to get blocked. So if you want to hear me talk a little bit more about sugar, you're going to have to read rather than, because right now I'm not getting blocked for my blogs, but anyway, so Cocaine Bear, oh my gosh, so worth watching. And I am not worried. When I go to Waterton, I am not worried about running across Cocaine Bear. But I mean, there's some parts of the story where you know that like a lot of people die really horrifically in this, and a lot of them it was because of the bear who was amped up on cocaine, who really loved cocaine, was seeking it out. I mean, they'd have a great sense of smell. And they have dogs that sniff out drugs on people on airplanes and stuff. Well, this bear, she was knowing where to find it, right? She was sniffing it out. Oh, man. What do you do?
Of course, she was hooked on it.
Oh, totally. Totally. She loved the stuff. Anyway.
And had a bad attitude.
Yeah,
so she was amped.
Amped up. So, yeah, you watch the movie and you go, okay, well, these people all died, so we don't know, based on a true story, you got to kind of reconstruct, and I guess they did, from what, they would look at the crime scene and go, oh, yeah, that's probably what happened, right? But, wow. Watch the movie. Watch it again and again. So awesome.
Be prepared to have a sore throat from laughing so hard.
Yeah. So James is going to talk about something.
It could be a variety of different things.
Yeah.
I think I'll just improvise and talk about a guy who was amped on cocaine for much of his playing career. His name is Derek Sanderson. You might not have heard about him. But if you, hey there, Mr. Blue Jay, or Mrs. Blue Jay. There we go. So if you ever watch some highlight reels of
and it can be so stressful to break addictions. I mean, addictions like sugar, whatever, it's stressful, I know. And it's, how do you control things like intense stress? How do you control that? If you want to try to break an addiction.
Check this addiction out.
Oh, addiction to Blue Jay. He's always here, but if I turn the camera around, I don't know if you'll catch him.
He's addicted to peanuts.
Oh, and there it goes. Let's see if he stays right. There he is. He loves those peanuts. And that's his favorite perch, is right there. Well, I think that's actually the woman.
Yeah, if you back off, you'll see him going back and forth if you back off.
Okay, I'll try to sit down.
Back and forth.
Try to sit down and watch the Blue Jay.
He might be full, or she might be full.
Yeah, I think that's the woman. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think the bigger one's the male, but I don't know. There's some even smaller ones that come around now, and we think they're the kids.
See how it hops off of
the wood. I know they like that plywood piece to bounce off of. I can hear her crunching. There she is. Oh, and there she goes. I guess that was enough.
Yeah,
the two peanuts.
So hopefully you folks enjoyed that. That's probably going to be the highlight for you guys of the deck dinner. So this guy was seriously addicted to cocaine. Probably had troubles with alcohol too. I think eventually had a little trouble with food. You can see how slim he was basically when he was playing. And then here he is in retirement and he's chopped out. I think maybe a bit of an addiction to food. So it's got a picture of Derek Sanderson. It looks as though he's the youngest child, older sister. Here he is with his very young looking dad. And what does he say? It upsets me when people attribute my battles with addiction to problems within my family. I had an idyllic childhood with parents and a sister who loved me dearly. Here Dad is taking me and my sister Karen fishing. So folks, wake up and smell the coffee. It's morning time. Wake up and smell the coffee. There's Derek Sanderson. He's almost at the top of the world. And it wasn't due, his addiction wasn't due to family. He was a bit of a smartass. And he thought he'd be messing around with drugs when he was a young pup. And drugs started messing around with him. David Crosby son of a guy I think who worked on movie production in Hollywood, in the LA area. He ended up supporting his own habits and stuff like that by being something like a second story man by his own account, lugging a gun, stealing from people. Got on all sorts of drugs. How bad was it? He eventually had to get a liver transplant, I believe his liver, and just to save his life. And he said, like it really didn't start to hit me, the addiction or whatever, till he was about age 30. So he just really thought he was a smart buttock and stuff like that. So this book might I highly recommend. I was going to mention, if you're watching some highlight reels, they're not really reels, like on the internet, of Bobby Orr. I've got a highlight reel. It's kind of like a reel. It's a video of Bobby Orr, not for my favorite team, and he's not my favorite player by any means, but he was very good. Maybe the most brilliant hockey player of all time. Not the best, not even close. He didn't play long. He was retired by the age he was 30 because he had lousy knees. But two people that I noticed on those highlight reels. One is Johnny McKenzie, a little guy who was with the Boston Bruins, and it looked as though he's going to have an ignominious career, at least as far as the team is concerned, because the team was going nowhere until Bobby Orr came in the picture. So the reason why he's on so many of Bobby Orr's highlights is because Johnny McKenzie played right wing and Bobby Orr on the power play, and Boston Bruins power play, and Bobby Orr played right defense, and so often they're passing back and forth, Johnny McKenzie. But Derek Sanderson is maybe on more of those things, and that's because Bobby Orr and he scored a lot of shorthanded goals, because Derek Sanderson was responsible for killing penalties, and he made the Boston Bruins tick, because Boston Bruins were a nasty team, and the kind of like the original nasty team, at least in the 70s. Philadelphia Flyers were even nastier, and they mugged Boston Bruins. It was hilarious, a real come-up out of a Stanley Cup. I think that was '74 and stuff like that. Stanley Cup final, and they mugged their way to the Stanley Cup win over the almost like the corpses of the Boston Bruins. And but Derek Sanderson had wheels, and he was quite an intelligent player. He says here, and it might be true, that a good center winning faceoffs in the NHL, winning probably nowadays, back then won 60% of his faceoffs. He claims, at least at his peak, he was 90% win rate for faceoffs. So you can imagine what that would mean in killing penalties. So often you're in your own end, and if you can get possession of the puck off a face-off, you can clear pretty well. But this guy was good on the counterattack. You'll watch him and Bobby Orr interacting. He has here, this is Bobby Orr's most famous moment. It's overrated because it was an overtime goal that won a Stanley Cup, but it was the fourth game of a 7-game series. I think it was 7 games, so 4 games. The Bruins, if they hadn't won that game, they would have won one of the next 3. But here it is. Here's Bobby Orr flying through the air. It's commemorated after he scored that goal against St. Louis Blues. And here it is commemorated in front of the Boston Gardens. It's, I guess, considered the greatest moment in Boston Bruins history. But out of the picture here is a little guy called Derek Sanderson. And Bobby Orr had come in from his right defense position, moved the puck into Derek Sanderson in the corner, and then Bobby Orr moved to the front of the net, and Derek Sanderson gave him a classic give-and-go pass, and the rest is kind of like history. There's lots of pictures in here. Here's Here's the little smartass fixing a stick. Guy dressed to the T's. It's not as though he was poor and got addicted on drugs and stuff like that. Okay, so I've seen one highlight of Frank Mahovlich kneeing, I've mentioned it before, kneeing Bobby Orr in the Detroit. Then Frank Mahovlich was with the Detroit Red Wings. Second team he was with, NHL. Started with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and he headed finally to where he really achieved something like greatness. Headed to Montreal before he jumped to the WHA. That was a mistake. But there was at least one comment on the internet on this clip of Mahovlich kneeing Bobby Orr. Oh, there was no one on the Bruins to protect Bobby Orr. Okay, little dose of reality, folks. The Bruins all bought into the principle that no player was ever alone on the ice. If one of our guys got jumped, the closest Bruin was to immediately step in to help. Here I'm tangling with Dickie Duff of the Canadiens, with all three officials intervening. Now, Dickie Duff was a wee little guy. I don't think of him as being nasty and dirty. So, like Derek Sanderson was picking on Dickie Duff. And that's something that he doesn't mention. Like a Boston Bruin player would be picking on a player, oftentimes a smaller one, and then the rest of the Boston Bruins would come in, and it was like a gang activity. In other words, they'd be ganging up on small players. And Montreal Canadiens found a way of dealing with that, and that way was called Larry Robinson. And he had the Philadelphia Flyers and Boston Bruins and other bullies skating in fear of him because he had such long reach and he was so tall and big and strong. The Canadiens also had guys with big long reach like Gilles Lupien and Pierre Bouchard, son of Butch Bouchard, and a few others. But basically, Montreal had some very small players like Doug Jarvis, Pierre Mondoux back in the day. Doug Risebrough could handle himself, but he was a smaller player. And Régent Houle, they had some quite small players. And plus they had players that were very clean players like Guy Lafleur, who weren't the biggest in the world, Steve Shutt, and who were interested in actually scoring goals and not in mugging other players, and they needed protection. So, to that idiot who was talking about Bobby Orr not getting any protection, do a little bit of reading and actually watch some stuff. Bobby Orr was out there, he's a chippy little player. He was out there asking for trouble, crying for trouble really, and the Boston Bruins were going out of their way to be mean, nasty, and evil to other players. So, and my suspicion is when Frank Mahovlich, who wasn't the cleanest player, but wasn't the dirtiest player either, when he clipped Bobby Orr on the knee, something had happened. The Boston Bruins had been being mean to him or to some other Detroit players, and you mean to one player, you're on another team. Why would Frank Mahovlich go after someone like Ted Green or Wayne Cashman or Ken Hodge or Phil Esposito when there's someone vulnerable knees and not quite as big, although he was chippy, he wasn't quite as nasty as some of the players I mentioned. Why would he do that? So we've got some pictures of here, dressed as a girl actually, Derek Sanderson. So he's always dressed to the T's. He's, it's not You wouldn't consider this guy ugly, would you? I mean, in today's standards, kind of long hair and stuff like that. He was considered handsome back then. So it's not as though he's going, oh man, I've got to drown my sorrows because I'm so ugly. He would have been considered very handsome. He was kind of a success with the gals and stuff like that. So here he is, dressed to the T's as a cowboy.
Come on, get in.
And stuff like that. Here's his mom. It looks as though he loves his mom. His mom, he says, was good looking. You know. Here's a high school picture. He looks uncharacteristically unkempt. I don't know what happened there. But ordinarily, I mean, he looks a bit like a juvenile delinquent there. He must have been awfully embarrassed of that. So often he's, dressed the T's. Here he is in the cowboy hat. You can call he's dressed as a cowboy. I mean, to the teeth. I would have loved to just have a cowboy hat, but he's got the guns and, the whole costume. They must have been pretty well off, the family. Here he is getting interviewed, looking a little bit down his nose at the interviewer. And that's kind of the way Derek Sanderson was. Here he is, preening, combing his hair in the mirror, The Bruins players like hanging with baseball players and other stuff. Here he is hanging with a spiffy dresser, apparently Ken Harrelson. Wasn't that spiffy on the field, but I think his nickname was the Hawk. So I even remember the guy's nickname. Bobby Orr liked hanging with Ted Williams, who was maybe considered the greatest Boston Red Sox player of all time. Here's Derek Sanderson hanging with Bobby Orr and a real slime, the shame, not pride of, well, one of the shame of Kingston. Another one is shame is Don Cherry. Another one is Kenny the Rat Linsman. So let me see if I can find. Here he is. He loved wearing hats, so he's wearing an usher's hat. It looks more like a cop hat or whatever. Just loved dressing up, this guy. He's actually in a movie. And here he is with Eddie Westfall. I didn't realize Eddie Westfall was actually assistant captain. I get the impression Eddie Westfall didn't quite fit into the Boston Bruins character profile. I always thought he was an okay guy. Derek was I think he was a serious smoker. Oh, here he is smoking. And started to chew into his looks and stuff like that. He started to look a little bit wasted, maybe bags under his eyes. This is one shocking thing here. I wondered, Montreal used to have a guy called Chuck Leffley on their team. And he didn't do much with Montreal. He was a high draft choice. Then he went over to St. Louis, and he had this one blip in his career where he scored 43 goals and had 85 points. Now, obviously, he wasn't really that good at setting plays up, 43 goals, and it looks like 42 assists, more goals than assists. What? Oh, now I find out here, like, this would be almost 50 years later, why that happened. See, they both had career seasons, Chuck Leffley and, oh yeah, Derek Sanderson. He was playing with Derek Sanderson before the drugs really started taking hold. And Derek Sanderson scored 24 goals and had 67 points. So he had 43 assists.